What is up, basketball fans? Welcome to the NBA Outlet. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron. Kory, how are we doing in 2020?
First pot of 2020. And let me tell you, this is, this is like been the going joke, right? 2020 vision. So far this NBA season, we've had some 2020 vision on this podcast. I just want to say we've been right on some predictions and predicting some trade guys and some outcomes so far. So I just want to say 2020 vision seems to be a real thing for the NBA Outlet.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kory, especially the trade targets. I think that's something we've nailed. But before we get started, as always, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, OTGBasketball.com, and YouTube. But we're going to start off with Studs and Duds. Stud of the week for the Western Conference, Kory.
I went with James Harden.
Good choice.
He, once again, I know he didn't play against the Pelicans 3 games ago, but the last 2 games they have won. And once again, James Harden, the bad man that he is putting up big time stats. The other night against the Philadelphia 76ers, he had a triple-double, 44 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists, 13 for 24 from the field. The big thing that I've noticed about James Harden, especially after that first month of the season or so, is his efficiency is back up, right? He's having these big numbers and also has the efficiency to back it up. So for me, he was my stud of the week from the West.
Yeah, this last week he shot 56% from the field and 57% from 3. If he shoots those type of numbers, the Rockets just aren't going to lose games. I went with who's the other guy who's been one of the best players in the Western Conference, and that's Anthony Davis. 36 points a game, 64% from the field, 50% from 3, 10 free throws a game, 12 rebounds. And obviously we know about the defense. Anthony Davis has been very, very good for the Lakers and starting 2020 the right way.
Yeah, he was my runner-up. Again, that performance against the Pelicans is big time, right? 46 points. I thought it was funny, the LeBron James going to Instagram and saying, we gave up too much, huh? It was like, well, no one really said you gave up too much per se. It was more so the fact that, you gave up a lot of young assets for one guy. But whatever the case may be, Anthony Davis for sure deserves the nod.
Yeah, Anthony Davis, and obviously, Lakers make that trade every day of the week because he is a top 5 player. He's proving that right now, and obviously LeBron was pretty much saying, fuck those kids. But stud of the week for the Eastern Conference.
So my stud of the week for the Eastern Conference, and this is, of no surprise, I suppose, but it was Giannis Antetokounmpo. He missed some time to end last year, 2019, that is. With a slight injury. He came back in full force, a 23-10 game against Chicago, a nice 32-17 game against Minnesota on New Year's, and then 32-8 against the San Antonio Spurs. So for me, I went with Giannis Antetokounmpo. But I would say an honorable mention would be Jaylen Brown. Even though he didn't have giant scoring outputs, once again, the Boston Celtics are on a winning streak, and Jaylen Brown's been a big part of that.
Yeah, he's been maybe their second best player this season. I went with Giannis as well for stud of the week for the Eastern Conference. He played 29 minutes a game and scored 29 points a game. So a point a minute. That doesn't include the 11 rebounds and a couple assists too. Obviously, Giannis could be the stud of the week pretty much every week of the season.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, again, it's funny. The 2 guys we mentioned, right, from each conference, or Anthony Davis, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and James Harden. All 3 of these guys are probably in the top 5 for MVP voting at this point in time. I would think, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think when you look at the Lakers, the LeBron Anthony Davis thing makes him go down a little bit lower in the list, but Giannis I think is probably the favorite right now, and James Harden right behind him.
Yeah, I mean the top notch of the MVP race is very fun, and as we see this thing transpire farther.
100%. Now going to a sour note, dud of the week.
So my dud of the, are we doing both conferences or just my overall dud?
To you.
I guess we'll do both. So my first dud in the Eastern Conference was Goran Dragic. Oh no, sorry. Goran Dragic was my honorable mention. I went with Kendrick Nunn. The Miami Heat have lost 2 of their last 3 games, and the losses were by double digits to the Washington Wizards and Orlando Magic. And again, we've been kind of high on the Miami Heat on this podcast. The NBA in general has been really high on the Miami Heat. And these just aren't great losses when you're trying to be a top flight team in the East or in the league in general. You want to beat teams like Toronto, which they did on January 2nd, but losing to Orlando, losing to Washington, those are bad losses. Kendrick Nunn has been struggling shooting-wise these last 3 games. So I went with him as my dud of the week.
I went with Taurean Prince, the Brooklyn Nets.
Well, his number, I just peeked his shooting splits earlier today, like 36 from the field, 36 from three. I didn't realize how bad he was struggling.
Yeah, and he started the season off very well shooting wise. This last week, he averaged 10 points a game, 29% from the field, and 29% from three. And I can tell you from watching most of the Nets games, a lot of those threes are wide open. He's in a bad shooting slump right now. He needs to find his rhythm, so it's been a struggle. But moving over to the West, what we got?
I went with Nikola Jokic. He hasn't done anything. Actually, nah, I'm still going to go with him. I almost wanted to go with Damian Lillard, but he's been all right. I haven't been overly impressed with Nikola Jokic. I've watched a couple Denver Nuggets game. They beat the Pacers the other night, but Jokic to me just hasn't been overly impressive. The Nuggets, I think, have lost 2 of their last 3.
Yep.
And again, like Jokic can only do so much, but the fact of the matter is, defensively, he is just a huge minus. Teams really take it to Jokic. They abuse him in switches. And if his offensive capabilities aren't firing on all cylinders, if he's not near a triple-double, if he's not facilitating as well as being aggressive and scoring, then his value to me dips. So I went with him as my dud from the West.
Yeah, I'm going to go with another Denver Nugget, and this is a guy who gives an offensive boost, but he didn't do that last week. Averaged 11 points a game, 33% from the field, and 9% from three, and that's Will Barton.
Oof, those numbers are dreadful. Holy cow.
That 9% really pops.
we kind of mentioned this going into the year. The Nuggets are one team where they went, I mean, I think we've even said this earlier on this show in 2019. This team went like with the run it back mentality. They brought back in just Jeremy Grant, and this team looks right around, maybe similar to last year, but they haven't gotten better. And that's the big takeaway from the Nuggets this year is they are no better, if not worse, than they were last year, and that's not good enough in the Western Conference.
Well, that can lead us to our next topic. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, but I think this is fitting. Michael Porter Jr. has shown some real promise, having a big game this past week in 23 minutes, 25 points, 11 to 12 from the field. And you kind of posed a question to me, should they consider starting Michael Porter Jr.?
So, and again, this game was against the Indiana Pacers, so I got to watch that performance up close. I mean, that boy can score. Obviously, we know the back issues and concerns. I think he should start. Because I think he gives them a faster pace. I know Paul Millsap is Millsap, and he's a very good defensive anchor. And still, with his high IQ, he still makes the right plays. But I almost think Millsap makes more sense coming off the bench, and maybe try playing Michael Porter Jr. at a small ball 4. Or maybe you put him at the 3 and you play Millsap and Barton or Harris come off the bench and you mix it up a little bit, because Michael Porter Jr. looks to be a guy who can create his own offense, put the ball down on the floor and get you a bucket. And that's something the Nuggets, I think, need more of, is guys who can create their own shots, similar to Jamal Murray. But as we know with Jamal Murray, his issue is he's very inconsistent. What I saw from Michael Porter Jr. that game against the Pacers was I saw a young kid who just needs more minutes and more opportunity to shine. And that's something that Denver really hasn't given him a lot of until recently.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue. I think I'd start with just giving him consistent minutes. His minutes have been sporadic throughout the season. Some games he's getting DMP, some games he's playing 5 minutes, others it's 20 minutes. Like, if you can get him a consistent output of minutes, around the 20-minute mark, maybe turn him to a 6-man role. If he performs well, then you start pushing him in the starting lineup. And like you said, I think I'd want to leave Millsap in the starting lineup, though, to give you some of that defense, and then maybe move one of the other guards to the bench and then start him at, small forward or something like that. His game looks really smooth, but I would want to get him more reps, I think, in the rotation. And I know Mike Malone, I don't think he's been super happy with his defense at times. So I think if he can get it together in that bench role, why not start him? Because the potential is there. He could be a game breaker for them, maybe not this season, but next year or the year after that.
I think it almost makes sense if we're going to flip him into the starting lineup. You probably would flip out Will Barton. I think that would make the most sense. You just mentioned his struggles as of late. I think Barton also might actually do better coming off the bench with the ball in his hands more. Granted, we know how teams split minutes, so he'd still be playing with starters probably on the bench anyways. But that would be something I look into. But as you said, I think you ease Michael Porter Jr. into it, and you want to make sure that there aren't any lingering back issues that come up when he starts actually playing bigger minutes.
100%. You want to make sure he's healthy and kind of work him into that workload. But moving on from there, Kevin Love has been a big topic this week. He had a tirade, I guess, an outburst against the Cavs GM, Kobe Altman, and obviously there's been some bad body language on the court. Thoughts on the Kevin Love situation in Cleveland?
Man, it's fun to a degree. So you had, let's break this all down. This is like a 4-part mini series, right? So you had a game last week, and I'm drawing a blank on who they played, but you had Kevin Love walking off the court. He smacks his hand on the chair a few times, looks like he yells the F-bomb, and he was fined $1,000 for that outburst during the game. Then you fast forward, we hear the beginning of the rumblings of the rumors that Kevin Love wants to be dealt. Then you get the practice outburst where he verbally went out, as you mentioned, Koby Altman, basically saying, like, I'm disgusted with what we have here as this team. He also went to head coach, I'm drawing a blank on his name.
John Beilein.
John Beilein, and said that he didn't like the way the team was playing. He thought that the guys in the starting line were playing very selfish. And to note, Colin Sexton averages a team-high 3.9 assists per game. Kevin Love is second with 2.9. So there is some sort of case there where there is clearly not a lot of playmaking or ball movement going on if your highest guy is averaging 3.9 assists per game as your starting point guard. And then you have what happened following that, where he posted on Instagram a photo of the Joker as his mood on Instagram. And then last night you had during the game against, again, I'm drawing a blank, against OKC, where first half, clock's winding down, Sexton's dribbling, there's like a 7 or 8 second difference between shot clock and game clock, and Kevin Love is just like, yo, pass the fucking ball, bro. And he gets the ball, and he wings it full speed at Cedi Osman. And then that, of course, transpires into myself and a lot of Twitter guys going, like, Kevin Love just looks done. Like, that's the most clocked out I've seen a guy look on a basketball court in the first half of a game, where he's just like, yo, I hate playing with these guys. Then he went on Twitter afterwards, or Instagram, and was like, I love my teammates. And I think I mean, you know this. We're all human. When we have frustrations in life or in work or in other things, it sometimes, not meaningfully, it happens to be put on to other people around us, unfortunately, as just, you know, frustration builds. So I do agree that Kevin Love isn't maybe intentionally taking out on his teammates, but the situation as a whole in Cleveland has reached an all-time low between Kevin Love and the organization.
Yeah, I think last year was able to kind of deal with it because he was injured most of the season. But when you go from playing championship level basketball for 3 or 4 years, and then you get put on a team that's rebuilding, and really the guards don't know how to play NBA level basketball yet, they're still developing, it's really hard to adjust. And I think that just kind of gives you a better idea of the level of veteran play to young players. So like when a team tries to do this whole thing where they want to develop young talent and they have no veterans, they play a bad brand of basketball. When you have a lot of vets out there, they're going to take advantage of things. You know, Kevin Love was upset because he had Chris Paul in the post, a guy that he knows he has a size advantage on. He wanted the ball so he can work down there in case he needs a repost or something like that. And it's not the first time it's happened this season. So I understand Kevin Love's frustration, but to some defense of the Cavs, he signed the contract. We don't know what was said, or did they tell him he was going to move him down the line? But at the end of the day, you signed the extension to stay in Cleveland. Do you think Kevin Love should take some responsibility for playing in Cleveland because he signed the extension?
Oh, yeah, this is okay. This is okay, yeah. Thank you for recharging my memory of where I want to go with this. Yeah, I mean, so Bill Simmons had a tweet earlier today, which is where I was going with this, and he mentioned that this is like the Carmelo Anthony card, right? You get the big contract from the team you're with, and then 18, 16 months later, you're like, yo, I want out, and move me, kind of thing. And I think somebody made a comparison too, and they like about this, saying like Carmelo never was this aggressive on the court or to the GM during his wanting out of Denver. But I mean, this is the new NBA, right? This is almost the new age of sports. You sign a big deal with the team you're with, and the minute you become unhappy, you vocalize that you're unhappy and you get dealt. I just think that's the part of sports that we're in now. And I think, you know, anytime you're with a team and you're not winning and you're not having success, I think it's normal to want to have frustrations to get out. And Kevin Love has reached that point. I don't know if there's any way to like limit that or to make it so you're locked with a team for 3 more years. It is what it is, because we are in the player empowerment movement.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a rough spot for Cleveland. And I guess like Kevin Love's perspective would probably be that he expected the team to improve to some extent, but they're probably going to be as bad as last season and maybe move some other guys. So it doesn't necessarily help trade talks for Cleveland because they lose all leverage in this situation. So, but I would expect Kevin Love to be moved by the deadline.
Yeah, I would expect Kevin Love to be moved as well. And I will say, like, if Kevin Love thought this team was going to be better than expected or good, like, what did you really think, bro? Like, like you were this team was never a playoff team. It was never even close to a playoff team. Like, it was a 15 to 11 seed out in the East type of team to begin with. So that would be my only gripe would be if Kevin Love seriously thought he was going to sign the deal with Cleveland and be back to winning ways. That was just really naive.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting situation to keep an eye on. Like I said, Cleveland lost all leverage in the situation, so maybe someone's going to get a real steal on Kevin Love. But another big that's been mentioned in the trade rumors, Andre Drummond. It's been reported Atlanta, Dallas, Toronto, and Boston have all had interest. And Drummond does have a relationship with Kristaps Porzingis and Kyle Lowry. And this is all via Woj and Vincent Goodwill of Yahoo.
I mean, the Andre Drummond talks, we were on this, again, this is the 2020 vision. We mentioned this, in early November about the possibility of, Detroit maybe stumbling out of the gate and maybe they look to move Andre Drummond if they can't get things going. And it seems even the owner, Mr. Gore, is on board with the rebuild. Obviously, he swung for defensive with trading for Blake Griffin, this Andre Drummond contract, Reggie Jackson. The roster is just poorly constructed. I mean, there's just no way around it. Injuries also have played a part into maybe the downfall of this Detroit Pistons coalition. I don't know why it's a coalition. That's a weird word to use.
New year, new words.
Yeah, new year, new vocab. So, and Andre Drummond, we have a top 50 coming out. It'll be out this week, actually, for OTG that me and Jack Manuel have constructed. And we have Andre Drummond, I think, higher than most people would have him, I think, because I'm a big Andre Drummond fan on the low, maybe more so than I thought I ever was until I watched him beat the Pacers up 3 times. It could just be the Pacers suck at rebounding, so maybe that's why. But Andre Drummond has led the league in rebounding for 6 straight years. He is 26, going to be 27. He's honestly playing some of the most impactful defensive basketball of his career, averaging over a steal and over a block per game. I get those are just stats. Stats can also be empty at times. Note Hassan Whiteside. But I think Drummond is just a kind of a detriment of the environment of Detroit is a detriment to Andre Drummond. I think you put him in the right system, Andre Drummond can probably flourish. I don't know what team that is. I think in Boston, he clearly helps them with their need for rebounding and interior defense, because he kind of does what Cantor does rebounding wise, but it can bring a defense that Tice brings. Granted, there is no 3-point shooting. You look at Dallas, I think it makes sense for Dallas if they wanted to add rebounding, but I also don't feel great about any team trading for Andre Drummond, who's going to be a free agent. And maybe this is the question I'll ask you, Nick. Is Andre Drummond going to get max money this summer? Because that's been the big debate on whether or not people want to trade for Drummond is, what is the salary going to look like for Andre Drummond this coming offseason?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely could end up with a max money because he's going to be one of the best players available. We know this free agent class is pretty weak. So that's what kind of comes with trading for him. You're pretty much committing to him and hoping he's willing to commit to your team. Fit-wise, I think there's a couple good options, like you mentioned. I think Dallas is a great fit because you have Porzingis who can stretch the floor, and he has versatile defense, so it provides you with something different having Drummond there too, and he gives you that kind of physical presence and a great pick-and-roll partner to run with Luka. I think that would be a lot of fun. Like you mentioned, Boston, they really lack the big, but the problem with that is kind of matching salaries. They'd have to give up one of their big guns to match a salary to get a Andre Drummond. And then Toronto, I never really bought into that. Atlanta's interesting, but then that's pretty much guaranteeing they're going to sign him. But I think Andre Drummond would be best in a situation where he's just kind of surrounded with shooters and he can just run some pick and roll, rebound, can give you inconsistent rim protection. But I think that's the real thing that I've always disliked with Andre Drummond is you kind of never know what you're going to get because he has these weeks and these spans where he's one of the most dominant bigs in the league, and then other weeks where he's kind of playing on the bench in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, the motor is definitely a question mark for him. I think back to he played against Sacramento last year, and this was a game that even Zach Lowe pinpointed. Like you expect Andre Drummond to have a big game because there was like no Cousins, there was no front court guy who could have matched up with Drummond, and Drummond had one of his worst performances of the season. That's the kind of issue that you just brought up is the fact that his motor is questionable. Can he bring the same tenacity, on a nightly basis? And I also wonder though. Is that motor not being up to par? Is that a part of the fact that he's in Detroit with a team that just is in general a sluggish team? And it's funny that they're the Motor City, and the biggest question mark of Andre Drummond is his motor. I saw one other team as a possibility. the Charlotte Hornets, and I got like into like some like Twitter conversation with this, and people were saying like it makes sense for the Hornets to get talent and whatnot. And then like my argument, and I don't know how you feel, if you weren't gonna give Kemba Walker max money and you weren't gonna bring in assets to help Kemba Walker, why the hell are you trading for Andre Drummond a season later?
Yeah, I think the only way that they do that is maybe if they can get up some of their bad contracts.
But
You know,
then
like,
if you're Detroit and trying to rebuild, does it make sense to take any of those bad contracts?
I think when you're a rebuilding team, that's what you have to do. I think personally, that's the best way to build as a rebuild because all your young players that you're going to bring in are going to be on rookie contracts or, extremely low ones or minimum contracts if you're trying to get guys and you're taking flyers on them. So I think you can ask for more in terms of draft picks when you're taking bad contracts on too. I think it's easier to do that because all of a sudden hey, we're opening the books for you and we're giving you a better player. Charlotte's books aren't as bad as they used to be. A lot of the contracts are expiring. So still to your point, it's like, do you want to max out Andre Drummond? Do you think, he's going to be a good fit for you long term? Like you mentioned, he is only 26, but it's like, I don't feel good about Andre Drummond being the first or second best player on my team. I maybe could live with him being the third best player on my team if I have two other good stars, and it's a good fit for him.
Yeah, I stain on the fact that I think he could be your third best player, but I agree. I don't think he's a number one or a number two guy on any championship level team. I think he's a third and arguably probably better as your fourth, but because of the numbers he puts up, he's going to gauge like third person interest.
Yeah, it's just like the motor is a question, and when you're giving a guy that much money on a long-term contract, it's scary.
Yeah.
But again, Charlotte's not going to get any big free agents via the free agency, so this would be a move if they thought maybe they're a little bit
here, dude. Come on.
big time. But other than that, I think Drummond will be a guy that I think's moved because the Pistons made it evident that they don't want to pay him.
Yeah, I think he gets moved as well. I think he also came out today and said he would love, doing the classic PR route, saying he would love to play the rest of his career in Detroit. So he's even keeping his value up for the Detroit Pistons, which helps.
Yeah, no, it's a classy move from him. Obviously you want to keep things that way. And like you said, nice little PR move. But moving on from there, we did get an injury update on Kyrie Irving. To be honest, it wasn't really much of an update. It just pretty much gave us more details on the situation that Kyrie's dealing with his shoulder. He has the shoulder impingement and bursitis as well. There wasn't defined on which version of bursitis it is because that kind of impacts where the injury is, so we don't know that detail. But pretty much he recently got a cortisone shot the last week of December. He's going to see if he can kind of play through that and get back on the court. If not, he might have to get surgery.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to that press conference. I know you and Jack listened to that press conference as well, of Kyrie Irving giving his update. And, the issue is he can't put his shooting arm above his head without having discomfort.
Yep.
And again, when you're looking at the Brooklyn Nets, this Brooklyn Nets experiment, them signing Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, has never been about this year in particular. Because we knew that Kevin Durant was going to miss all of this year, if not the vast majority of it because of his Achilles. For sure, he's going to miss all of it now just with how standings are. I don't believe they're going to rush him back. And now with the Kyrie stuff, it just kind of furthers the point of probably should just have these guys get healthy for the long haul, big picture. If Kyrie Irving wants to play, if he can play, I think sure. But being me, I would lean towards wanting Durant and Kyrie to be as healthy as possible when it's their time to shine together. And I also want to say that finally, this is the first update for over a month and a half from Kyrie, where he finally spoke to the media.
Yeah, this is the first time he's publicly spoke. Usually, though, that's a Nets policy. Usually, injured players do not talk to the media.
Okay. Which is good clarification. I don't think people on Twitter realize that. I know a lot of people were quick to make this a mental health issue with Kyrie Irving. So I just want to say how this is a prime example of why, a lot of times even we have some topics on this show that I want to talk about at times, and Nick's like, we shouldn't because we can't speculate. We shouldn't speculate. And this is a prime example of why you shouldn't speculate on shit you really don't know about. Because there was a lot of people last week saying Kyrie Irving's just a mental case. This guy's just depressed. He's just not happy, blah, blah, blah. And we get the full story, or at least the story from him and the team, and it's a shoulder injury. It's a bad shoulder injury that we weren't fully aware of the extent of it, but it's a bad shoulder injury that's keeping him out. It's not mental. It's not Kyrie Irving being moody. It's an actual injury. So again, let's stop drawing to conclusions that we really don't have anything to back it on.
What a surprise. An injury-prone player got injured. You would
Yeah.
never expect that. But with the Kyrie thing, I think a lot of it was people not understanding, the Nets not giving details, which always leads to more speculation when you have big names. So I thought this press conference was good, and it kind of gave you an idea that he's been rehabbing and he just really hasn't had positive results. That's why they're trying the cortisone shot, seeing if it could heal. It's just a really weird injury. And that was kind of a known thing. Shoulders are just tough to deal with, especially shooting shoulders. Like this is a guy that's going to put up a lot of shots. And Kyrie kind of said probably the reason he did injure it was because he missed so much time in preseason with that fracture in his face. He was getting up an excessive number of shots during the time he was able to practice in preseason and then the first few games of the season. So most likely it's just overusage of that shoulder, but he kind of put it in a weird funk where it's going to be hard to get out of.
Right. I mean, we've thinking about shoulders, the latest case we've had, or at least for me to like draw a connection to, is Paul George, right? Paul George just had double shoulder surgery this past offseason, and we've kind of seen what playing with a shoulder injury has looked like for him in OKC last year. The shooting numbers were very inconsistent. He had some big time games, but some bad games. And that's kind of where Kyrie would be at if his shoulders aren't going to be 100%. It's because it's hard, and as you said, it's clearly overuse. And he admitted to it. He tried to do a pickup, and as you and me who both work out a lot, it's very easy to overwork a muscle without, or overwork a joint without realizing it. And that's just what he's done. Is now you just got to be cautious.
Yeah, especially your shoulder. So it'll be interesting to see if he plays because it seems like he wants to play. The conspiracy theory on Nets Twitter, and obviously if you want a deeper look at this, myself and Jack Manuel will dive in deep on the Brooklyn Buzz, is that Kyrie really wants to play the season because he believes Kevin Durant will be back later in the year. Because there's also a report, this kind of flew under the radar, but KD's Achilles injury was actually higher on his Achilles than expected, which results in faster recovery time because you have better blood flow.
Oh, thank you for dropping that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that kind of flew under the radar. Obviously, it's a small detail. Achilles injuries are still very serious, but the conspiracy theory on Nets Twitter is that Kyrie really wants to play this year because he thinks Kevin Durant will be back and he thinks they can make a playoff push. Because obviously, if you have those two, home court advantage doesn't really play a factor. Obviously, Kyrie has to get healthy for that to even be a thing, and KD has to get healthy.
And I think, to this point, we thought the East was a two-team race. Not to get too much off topic, but we thought the East was a two-team race. It looks like it's the Bucks and everybody else.
Yeah.
I don't think
you could argue that maybe the Sixers are down into
Yeah.
a lower level and maybe the Celtics and Heat have jumped them.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, especially with, we've seen some of the media talks out of, the Philadelphia 76ers last couple of days and Embiid and his talk. That situation also could turn bad rather quickly if they keep struggling.
Yeah, let's dive into it. That wasn't a planned topic, but I did find that really interesting. I haven't got all the details on it, but it seems like Joel Embiid's not happy. People have mentioned maybe they should look to move Embiid or move Simmons. What's your take on the situation? Should they look to move one of the core pieces on that team, or they should just make some trades to bring in some shooters and some competent guards?
I mean, this is a team that I think we've talked, a decent amount about, off wax and before the season started when they brought in, all of these guys. So Embiid is frustrated, and it happened. Your best player and you're losing, you're going to be frustrated. He doesn't really take a lot of the blame from what I've seen and heard. It almost feels like he puts the blame on everybody else aside from him, which I don't like, and that's also just not a leadership quality.
Especially for a guy who missed a lot of games and has conditioning issues.
Right. And I think the last game they lost, I think it was, I can't remember who it was towards, but he looked at someone and said, "Not my fault," or "It wasn't me." But he was talking to like the other team. Like
I want to say it was against Houston.
I think it was against Houston, right? And he was like, "Not on me," and it's just like, oof, like that's your mentality, bro. Like you guys, this is a team. It's a we. It's everybody when you lose. And that's youth probably. Now you mentioned, do you trade somebody? I think you have to trade somebody. I don't think that's a hot take. This team, you had hopes that you were going to bring in Al Horford, you were going to bring in Richardson, you were going to have Tobias Harris as this scoring punch, as your probably your number 2 scoring option behind Embiid. These 5 don't work with the bench they have. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, they play styles that just don't really help each other, right? Ben Simmons needs to get out and running, and Embiid kind of needs to be more in the half court set. Do I think you have to trade one or the other? Not necessarily. I'm not ready to say Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid can't coexist, but I am ready to say that of Horford, Tobias Harris, and Jason Richardson, something has to go. Or Josh Richardson.
Yeah.
Sorry, just do that.
You must have really loved Jason Richardson's
Yeah.
dunks.
Phoenix
Um,
Sun days really
but
like dunks.
but that's the problem really though. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid have different styles, and we've mentioned this in the past. Ben Simmons in a role similar to Giannis in Milwaukee, where he's surrounded by shooters, he'd be a more dynamic player. Obviously, Joel Embiid's best position is down in the post where he's dominating, and they just don't gel well. I think long term it maybe makes sense to trade one of those guys unless they're able to adjust their game enough. A lot's on Brett Brown, and a lot of it is the roster construction. You get the idea they wanted to go super big and try to win the East that way, but really they should have surrounded shooters with, surrounded Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid with just more shooters. The whole Al Horford project hasn't worked, and that looks like it could end up being a very sour contract.
And he's unhappy. And that's another
Everyone's unhappy.
Right. He came out and said that this is not the role he anticipated. Again, I'm not sure what the hell went on in the negotiations. We weren't there. But for some reason, Al Horford doesn't think whatever was pitched to him is going according to plan. And from my perspective, in my opinion, I don't know what role he thought he was going to have. I really don't know what you thought. This isn't the Boston Celtics. They're not going to run a lot of stuff from you in the high post. Like, your role is just vastly different. You're a safety net for Joel Embiid. That's really what Horford is.
What Horford saw in the negotiations was the contract numbers. He did not pay attention to what they said because obviously his deal is huge. I believe he's 33 years old. He's making 28 this year, 27.5 next year. The year after that, 27, and the last year, 26.5. That is a big contract that's going to carry him past his mid-30s.
Tough to move because what team really wants that?
I'm not sure who does. I'm not sure if anyone does, really.
I think the only player who's like really tradable at this point in time, I mean, obviously, I think Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid go without saying. But I think like you would have to look at like Tobias Harris probably has some value, and then Josh Richardson, and then Al Horford being the lowest of those five.
Yeah, I mean, you might even say Richardson's the most movable because of his contract number. He's only at 10 a year, and he's a starting player in the NBA, especially when he's more of a fourth or fifth option. I think Tobias Harris, the thing that sucks about him is you get him on a long-term contract, but it's big money for Tobias Harris. You're talking about 32.7 this year, 34.3 the next year. Then we're looking at 35.9, then 37.6, and then 39.2. So you're paying Tobias Harris almost $40 million in 2023, 2024.
Not good.
Yeah,
I almost wish
that's a perfect way to summarize it.
I almost wish like they wouldn't have went out and got Josh Richardson. They just re-signed JJ Redick. Like, yeah, I'm not sure what the fit. Like, you I guess this is the question I have for you. Is there, in your mind, a clear-cut way for this Sixers team to improve? What should they do? What would you do right now if you're Elton Brand? Like, what are you looking for? If you're are you looking to trade off one of these guys? Are you looking to make a smaller move? Like, where would you be if you're Elton Brand right now as the GM of the Sixers?
Well, first off, I would have never constructed this roster because this is just not my type of team. I'm not about the bigs in basketball.
Come on, they're 6'6" and up, man. These guys are tall. Trees.
We've kind of talked about it. It puts so much of a toll on this team to win regular season games. You're asking Tobias Harris and sometimes Al Horford to chase guys around screens. Like, that is just tiring for a guy that big. And it's just like they do not have enough team speed. And that was my biggest concern when they signed all these guys because I wasn't a big fan of Al Horford and Joel Embiid pairing when you already have Ben Simmons. If you had those two and you didn't have Ben Simmons and you had a point guard that could shoot threes or more of a playmaker, I think it would make more sense. But having, those three, that trio just puts your team in such a weird position. I think that you look to maybe move one of those guys. Obviously, that seems super rash, but I wouldn't want to move Joel Embiid because I just feel like Joel Embiid can be the most dominant player in the NBA sometimes where it's really hard to move a guy like that. And he could just go on a tear, and the trading him could be that motivation. So I think maybe you look to move Al Horford, but like we've kind of talked about, it's going to be extremely difficult. You try to maybe move Ben Simmons, but I think if you're moving Ben Simmons, you want to wait until the summertime because his contract number is higher. His extension kicks in. You can trade for maybe a star like Bradley Beal or something like that because he'd be such a great fit on this team. You have to make trades, but I'm not sure you have good value on your guys right now because I don't necessarily like the contracts of Harris and Horford.
So I think Cam played with like a type of trade. Would there be any scenario in which you think the Sixers should try and get Chris Paul?
That's an interesting one. Ah,
Because I mean, obviously, I think Ben Simmons would probably be a part of that.
yeah. Like I said,
But
if you trade Ben Simmons right now, you're trading him at 8 mil, and like I guess you're using somebody else to fill it. It could work if you
it could be
true.
Horford. I mean, it could be arguably Horford and Ben Simmons for Gallo and Paul.
Yeah, or something along those lines. I don't think it's the worst idea, but if you do trade for Chris Paul, your championship window just shrunk substantially. That's why I could.
Sorry, like 1 year. It's now.
Yeah, and then like there's always been rumors that Philadelphia is already pretty concerned about Joel Embiid and his long-term health, so that's kind of going all in. But it doesn't solve your shooting problem. Like Chris Paul is a solid shooter as a point guard, but like you mentioned, they really need a JJ Redick type, and they just don't have an elite shooter on their team, and that's what they're missing. Maybe they can get Redick back. Maybe they can make a move where they're bringing in more role players to sign with these guys. But I think long term, separating Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid might be the best idea.
I mean, it's definitely gonna be something we're gonna have to talk about more and more, especially as we get close to the trade deadline. And we'll have. I mean, the Sixers have lost 5 straight at this point in time, right? I think.
And they've had some bad losses for a team that has multiple All Stars on it. It's just not something you see.
So I mean, again, like if losing continues, there will be dramatic changes because you just can't go into All Star weekend, the trade deadline, with the title aspirations the Sixers have, especially with how close they came last year to the NBA Finals. You can't take a step back. So it'll be interesting to see how this team continues to progress. I would also say a name to watch. I think he was already tied to the Lakers and Clippers, but a guy like Darren Collison, who retired kind of abruptly from the Pacers, led the NBA 3-point shooting. I think 3 years ago now, was above 45% again last year. That could be another guy if he's out of retirement and looking for a spot. Philly could look for him to be their backup point guard because Trey Burke clearly isn't the guy they want to run with. And Darren Collison can provide some playmaking and shooting.
Yeah, and the buyout market is going to hopefully save them again. That's what happened in the past a couple years ago when they got Marco Bellinelli and Ersan Ilyasova. But still, I think the size problem is something they're going to have to handle. Just having those guys playing big minutes on the court together is just a real struggle. It might work playoff time, so maybe they could supplement some role players at this time to get there in the postseason. But I'm not sure if I just really love the fit. Moving on, though, to Collison, there's also rumors about the Lakers and Clippers being interested. This would be a godsend for the Lakers to get a point guard like this who can play a complementary role, like you mentioned. He's a good three-point shooter. He doesn't shoot necessarily high attempts, but if they're wide open, he'll knock them down. He's also a solid mid-range shooter too. I think it'd be a great fit for the Lakers.
Good pick and roll guy too.
Yeah,
That's something that he benefited with the Pacers.
and it's pretty easy to run pick and roll with Anthony Davis.
Yeah, that was the next point. So I mean, the Clippers are another team. I think the Clippers need them too. The Clippers lost yesterday to Memphis by 25. Granted, no Paul George, no Patrick Beverly, but they do have a playmaking facilitating point guard issue on that team. Lou Williams can give you some stretches off the bench, but I think that's a Clippers team that could use a guy like Collison. As you mentioned, the Lakers, we've reached the point in the season where it's F Rajon Rondo, get this man out of town among Lakers Twitter. Rondo plays some bad minutes. Quinn Cook, nothing special. Darren Collison would surely give them, if LeBron's going to run point guard, he still is out there as a very capable ball handler and playmaker. I think Collison makes a ton of sense for the Lakers if he decides to come out of retirement.
And obviously, we want to see where he's at because he did take some time off basketball. He's going to get in basketball shape, but it'd be a huge boost for either team because last time we saw him in the NBA, he was probably good enough to be your 5th or 4th starter.
Yeah. I mean, he a 10-year NBA vet who was averaging, 12 and 5 over the course of his career, primarily as a backup point guard as well. The Pacers had him play as a starter, but he's primarily a backup point guard.
And even the Lakers could use him as a backup point guard, like somebody to run that second unit or something along those lines. It'd be an interesting name to keep an eye on. Obviously, it looks like he's focused on going to a contending team.
And here's just to give some context to his stats the last 2 years. So he led the league 2017-2018 season with 46% from three.
How many attempts?
3 attempts.
See, that's always been my thing with Collison. I think he's a really efficient three-point shooter, but he picks his spots. It'd be interesting to see what he does in a higher volume, but obviously you're going to get plenty of wide open threes that you play with LeBron and Anthony Davis or Paul George and Kawhi.
And last year, as the starting point guard for the Indiana Pacers, he averaged 11 points per game, 6 assists, 1.5 steals, 3 rebounds on shooting splits of 46, 40, and 83. Again, they only shot 2.6 threes per game. But again, he'll get better looks playing with a team like the Lakers than he ever did in Indiana.
And Indiana was obviously a little bit lower in terms of three-point attempts as a team in the league.
Yeah, they sucked.
I didn't go and say that. But any other topics you want to touch on, Kory, before we get to games of the week?
No, I think that was a nice little recap since we haven't done this in a week and a half.
Yeah, so if I said anything wrong, don't hold it against me. I was on vacation this last week, so I missed a lot of basketball stuff. Back in the grind, though, for 2020. We're going to be diving in. But let's get to games of the week and what I should be watching this week, Monday night.
Monday night, both of our teams play. Pacers play the Hornets, Nets play the Magic. So those will definitely have our attention early on. You have Sixers, Thunder. I think the game of the night Monday, there's not like a great slate of games, honestly.
Welcome back, Nick. No.
Yeah, and actually, I think Thunder Sixers is probably the best game of the night at 7 o'clock. Sixers, obviously, as we said, they've lost 5 in a row. They kind of need to get things back on track. And the Thunder, I believe, have won 4 in a row or 5 in a row. They're playing good basketball as of late. So I think that would probably be my game of the night. And they've won 5 in a row. So one team will be ending a 5 streak of some sort.
Chris Paul said rebuild. Ha. No. I actually am going to go with Nets and Magic. I'm not saying because it's biased. The Nets are currently the 7th seed and the Magic are 8th. So I think this game has some value to both teams. And the Nets have not been playing well, dealing with a lot of injuries. Orlando dealing with a lot of injuries. These two teams will try to grind it out. Like you said, this slate is not amazing.
No, but you're right. That
Atlanta and Denver actually could be a pretty good game because Atlanta has been playing a lot better the last week.
Come on, man. Like, can we stop opening up wounds? I just watched them beat the Pacers last night for their 8th win of the season. Their 8th win of the season on a back-to-back. And they lost in Boston the night before. And then Kevin Huerter and freaking Trae Young combined for like 65 points. I don't want to talk about it. But yeah, I guess that could be exciting.
I think the thing that makes the Hawks kind of dangerous is they just shoot so many threes. If they get into a hot stretch with some of the shooters they have, it can be really dangerous. But
Trae Young is unreal. Unfreaking real.
He's tough to defend. His vision is great too. So, but Tuesday night.
Again, not a great slate of basketball. We got Lakers, Knicks at the end, Kings, Suns, Timberwolves, Grizzlies, It honestly might be Thunder, Nets.
Back-to-back
Thunder,
nights.
Nets, or Blazers, Raptors. Those are probably the 2 games that I'll be keeping an eye on. Blazers still trying to get things together, struggling. They're another team, I would say, like the Sixers, obviously they're in worse shape than the Sixers, but a team that's probably moving closer and closer to having to trade one of their bigger names on the roster.
Yeah, it'd be so cool if Dame wanted to be traded because, like, imagine if the Philadelphia made a trade with Portland and they got Damian Lillard.
Woo! Yeah,
and if they gave up like Ben Simmons and even like Tobias Harris or something, and they gave up a ton of picks. I'm not sure what their pick situation is, but I love to see Dame moved. I don't think it's going to happen. We're more likely to see CJ McCollum move because that team sitting at 15 and 21, they are the 8th seed, but they can't feel great about their whole squad.
No,
obviously injuries have killed them, but still.
No, it's, and again, like, I'm happy for Melo, but like there has been at times a little bit too much Melo. And I think the fact that Melo is their 3rd best player kind of just says like that's not great.
Yeah, like no disrespect to Melo, but
he's playing good. He's playing really good basketball. I mean, he's shooting 43, 41, and 80 on shooting splits, 16 points per game. I mean, he's not their issue, but having to rely on Melo
says a lot about them.
A lot about the basketball team, yeah.
Yeah, and that's no disrespect. He's just up there in his career, and obviously he hasn't aged as gracefully as the alien human LeBron James. But Wednesday, what do we got?
Wednesday night is a better slate of basketball, actually. So for me,
we got some fire matchups.
Yeah, so I think for me, my game of the night would easily be the Heat Pacers. Battling for who is possibly the 2nd or 3rd best team in the East behind the Bucks. I think an honorable mention would be Nuggets Mavericks. 2 teams that score a lot of points. Luka Doncic is healthy. Have recorded his 10th triple-double the other night. I think those would be the 2 games I circle.
Yeah, no, Heat and Pacers should be a lot of fun. Denver and Dallas should be fun. I even would be interested in Chicago and New Orleans because they're both kind of like bad good, if that makes sense. Like they occasionally play good enough. So And even Houston and Atlanta, we've seen them have some really strange games against each other because of the lack of defense from Atlanta, sometimes lack of defense from Houston, and just the offensive output they can put on. That 7 and 7:30 slate is pretty good on at least half of it.
And shout out to Lonzo Ball.
Yeah.
Probably could have been honorable mention for stud of the week. 3 straight games of 20-plus points, had a triple-double in the mix. Finally looks to be healthy. So shout out to Lonzo Ball.
Shout out to Lonzo. Yeah, it's good for him. He's starting to look like a starting level NBA point guard. Obviously, he needs to do it over a more consistent stretch, but it seems like New Orleans is starting to get their things together. But on to Thursday night, we rolling with the nationally televised games.
Yeah, I think it's no brainer. I mean, unless you want to see Kevin Love throw a hissy fit against the Pistons at 7, you're probably going to want to watch the Celtics and Sixers. And then to cap off the night, Rockets Thunder definitely has intriguement.
Would you rather watch the Cavs and Pistons play or Kevin Love and Blake Griffin record a podcast?
Ooh, Kevin Love and Blake Griffin record a podcast. I think that's got some intriguement in it because they can talk about frustrations maybe and injuries. Yeah.
And Kevin Love's good on camera. He's comfortable talking, and Blake Griffin is mad funny. So I would deal with that podcast. But I'm intrigued by Boston and Philadelphia. We know there's some bad blood in that matchup. If anything can get Philly going, it's kind of just that extra tension in a matchup like that. And then obviously we got Westbrook versus Chris Paul and James Harden versus that OKC team. That should be fun. A little revenge in there.
Yeah.
Friday night. We got a big slate Friday night.
Friday's a big slate with 2 weird times. ESPN starting games at 7:15.
Ooh, that is weird. I think what they do is because they run SportsCenter, I want to say at 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., and they technically need to do a pregame show. That's why you get to 7:15 if I had to guess.
Yeah. So my game of the week, though, for Friday would be the 9:45 game on ESPN, Lakers Mavericks. These two teams have played some really fun games so far this year. I expect nothing else with Luka Doncic being healthy.
Yeah, that should be a great matchup. I'm looking forward to Nets and Heat, but I'm definitely going to watch Lakers and Mavericks because it seems like LeBron plays a little extra edge, and obviously Luka brings some extra game when he's playing up against his idol.
Yeah.
Now, Saturday night.
We're finishing the week strong in games. I think Lakers Thunder would be an honorable mention. I think Mavericks Sixers would be my game of the night. Again, another Mavericks game. I'm leaning heavy with Luka. I think those would be my 2 games to circle.
Yeah, I like it. Lakers and Thunder, 76ers and Mavericks. A couple of the other games could be somewhat interesting, but not going to carry the same kind of star level as those 2. Yeah. And then finally Sunday. Your Hawks Nets should be entertaining. I actually may not be watching that game because my Green Bay Packers will be playing at 6:40, so I'll have to do double TVs that day.
Ooh, yep.
That's pure punishment, though.
Is it?
It is, because at least give me the doubleheader. Like, trying to watch 2 games intently is extremely hard. I'll end up probably rewatching the Nets game because I'll be so into playoff football.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, too. I think game of the night, though, or game of the day for Sunday would be Clippers Nuggets. 2 of the top Western Conference teams battling it out.
Yeah, I agree. They're obviously Denver hasn't been as good as we'd hope, but they're still up there in the standings, and they're competing for one of those top seeds.
Clippers haven't been as good either. 5-5 their last 10. They have some issues they're trying to work out.
I feel like with the Clippers, I'm not really super worried about them because they just rest so many guys on a regular basis, or they're just kind of injured and they're not playing in a consistent flow. But I feel like when they're healthy and they want to win a game, they can go out and win a game.
Yeah.
All right, that wraps it up. We're back for 2020 with our first episode of the year. Kory, always a pleasure. Big thanks, everybody, for listening. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, OTGBasketball.com, and YouTube.
Peace out, knuckleheads.